Welcome to Reflect with Ed Fassio. Get ready to experience one of the world's first 100% digitally generated podcasts, where we take a step back, dive deep, and strive to learn new things. Join us as we unpack thought-provoking ideas, personal reflections, and inspiring stories to help you stay in the know. Reflect is brought to you by the minds at ByteBrain and powered by emerging technologies from Google, HeyGen, OpenAI, and 11 Labs. Thanks for tuning in. Now, relax and prepare to reflect.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going on a trip into the world of psychedelic and dissociative drugs. You've given us some pretty fascinating articles and research, and we're ready to break it all down.
Yeah, it's a topic that really captures the imagination, doesn't it? I mean, we're not just talking about getting high here. These drugs have been used for thousands of years in spiritual practices, and now they're being studied for their potential to treat some of the most challenging mental health conditions.
Exactly. It's like we're rediscovering these powerful tools, but we're also having to figure out how to use them responsibly in a modern context. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just lay some groundwork. What exactly are we talking about when we say psychedelic and dissociative drugs?
Well, both types of drugs alter your perceptions and your mood, but they do it in different ways. Psychedelics, like psilocybin from magic mushrooms or LSD, mainly affect serotonin receptors in the brain. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that plays a huge role in regulating mood, sensory perception, and a lot more. So when you take a psychedelic, it's like it hijacks those serotonin pathways, leading to those vivid hallucinations, feelings of interconnectedness, and altered sense of self that people often describe.
Okay, so psychedelics mess with your serotonin. What about dissociatives?
Dissociatives like ketamine and PCP work a bit differently. They primarily target glutamate, which is another important neurotransmitter involved in things like learning, memory, and pain perception. As the name suggests, dissociatives can cause you to feel detached or dissociated from your body and surroundings. It's like your brain is temporarily taking a break from reality.
That makes sense. Now, I know from looking at this research from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NID, that the effects of these drugs can be pretty unpredictable. Why is that?
That's one of the most important things to understand about these substances. There are so many factors that can influence how someone will react to a psychedelic or a dissociative drug.
Right.
It depends on their individual biology, the dose they take, their mindset going in, what we call set, and the environment they're in. The setting.
So set and setting can make or break the experience, right? Like if you take a psychedelic in a chaotic environment when you're already feeling anxious, that could increase the risk of a bad trip.
Absolutely. That's why harm reduction is so crucial with these substances. Having a supportive environment and a positive mindset can dramatically reduce the risks.
And it sounds like it's never a good idea to just experiment with these drugs on your own without any guidance or support.
Definitely not.
Right.
Now, while NIDA is very clear about the potential risks, the research also points to some potentially profound effects of these drugs, particularly what's known as the mystical experience.
Yeah, that's what I find so fascinating. We've got these drugs that can make you see sounds and feel colors, but they can also lead to these deeply spiritual and life-changing experiences. What's going on there?
The mystical experience is a really intriguing phenomenon. It's often described as this profound sense of unity, interconnectedness, and transcendence of time and space. People report feeling the sense of oneness with the universe or connection to something larger than themselves.
Wow.
And what's remarkable is that researchers have actually developed ways to measure the intensity of these experiences using questionnaires and scales.
So it's not just subjective. They can actually quantify these feelings of transcendence.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that these mystical experiences seem to be linked to some of the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. Why is there so much hype around the therapeutic potential of these drugs?
Well, there's increasing interest in using psychedelic and dissociative drugs to treat a wide range of conditions, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, and even addiction.
I know the FDA has already approved esketamine, which is related to ketamine, for severe depression. That seems like a pretty big deal.
It is. It's a sign that the medical establishment is starting to take the potential of these substances seriously. And when you look at the research, there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that these mystical experiences, these profound shifts in perspective, can actually play a key role in the healing process, particularly for people who are struggling with substance abuse or coping with cancer-related distress. Researchers like Griffiths, Ross, Bogenschutz, and Rothberg have been doing some groundbreaking work in this area.
It's like these experiences help people break free from old patterns and connect to something larger than themselves. It's almost spiritual.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And there's also evidence that psychedelics might actually promote neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change and adapt.
Wow.
So it's not just a temporary change in mood. It could be something more fundamental, like a rewiring of the brain.
Wow. That's incredible. So we've got ancient rituals, modern therapy, mystical experiences, and the potential to rewire the brain. This is some seriously powerful stuff, but I know there are also risks involved, right?
Yes, absolutely. We need to be very clear about that. These are powerful substances, and they can be dangerous if not used responsibly.
Let's dive into those risks in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of psychedelics and dissociatives.
Right. We need to be responsible here.
Yeah.
You know, these drugs aren't for everyone, and they're definitely not something to be taken lightly.
Right.
What are some of the dangers that we need to be aware of?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that these drugs can have adverse psychological effects.
Okay.
We're talking about things like fear, anxiety, confusion, even panic attacks.
And of course, there's the dreaded bad trip, right?
Yeah.
I know that's something people are really worried about when they consider trying psychedelics.
Yes. A bad trip is a really intense negative experience.
Yeah.
It can involve terrifying hallucinations, paranoia, a sense of losing control, and even feelings of dying. It's not something anyone wants to go through.
So how can we minimize the risk of having a bad trip?
Remember we talked about set and setting earlier? That's absolutely crucial here.
Right.
If you're going to explore these substances, you need to do it in a safe and supportive environment with a positive mindset.
It sounds like having a trusted guide or facilitator could be really important too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of safety, we also have to talk about the dangers of adulteration. This is a huge concern, especially with illicitly manufactured drugs.
What do you mean by adulteration?
It means the drug has been tampered with. You never know what you're really getting when you buy drugs on the black market. They might be cut with other substances, or they could be completely different drugs altogether, sometimes misrepresented as something else.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories about drugs being laced with fentanyl, which can be deadly even in tiny amounts.
That's a very real danger.
Yeah.
Fentanyl is a powerful opioid, and it's being found in all sorts of drugs these days, not just opioids.
Right.
So the message is clear. If you're considering using these substances, harm reduction is paramount.
Yeah.
Know your source, test your drugs, and never use alone.
That's good advice. And I know there are also some potential long-term health risks to consider, right?
Yes, there are some less common but potentially serious long-term risks associated with certain psychedelic and dissociative drugs.
What are some of those risks?
Well, for example, there's something called HPPD, or hallucinogen persisting perception disorder.
Okay.
It's relatively rare, but it can cause flashbacks and visual disturbances long after the drug has worn off.
That sounds pretty scary.
It can be. And ketamine, in particular, can cause urinary tract problems with long-term use.
Wow.
Some substances, like MDMA and ibogaine, have been linked to potential heart problems.
And of course, these drugs are definitely not something to mess around with during pregnancy.
Absolutely. The potential risks to a developing fetus are just too great. Now, shifting gears a bit, we've talked about the science and the potential risks, but there's another dimension to this conversation that's equally important. The spiritual debate.
Ah, yes. Are these psychedelic experiences real? I mean, are they like a genuine spiritual encounter or just a chemically induced illusion? I know this is something that a lot of people are grappling with.
It's a question that has sparked a lot of debate, especially in religious circles. We came across an article in Christianity Today that highlights this tension really well.
Sure.
It features a pastor named Joe Welker, who argues that promoting psychedelics as a Christian practice is a form of idolatry.
So he's saying that it's wrong to worship the drug or the experience itself.
Exactly. He believes that focusing on the experience can distract from genuine faith and a relationship with God. He's also concerned about the potential for manipulation and abuse, especially in unregulated settings where people might be more vulnerable to suggestion.
That's an interesting perspective.
It is, and it's important to acknowledge those concerns. But the article also presents a contrasting viewpoint from researchers at Johns Hopkins University,
Okay.
who suggest that psychedelics can, in fact, facilitate legitimate spiritual experiences.
So they're saying that even though these experiences are triggered by a drug, they can still be profound and lead to real spiritual growth.
That's their argument. They point to the fact that many cultures have used these substances for centuries in spiritual rituals and ceremonies. And they suggest that modern research is starting to confirm the transformative potential of these experiences.
So it sounds like there are valid points on both sides of this debate.
There definitely are. And it ultimately comes down to individual beliefs and how we choose to interpret these experiences. But one thing is for sure, this conversation isn't going away anytime soon, especially as psychedelic research continues to gain momentum. It's something we need to keep talking about as a society.
Absolutely. Now, I know there's a lot of excitement about the potential of these drugs to treat mental health conditions, but the legal landscape is still pretty complicated, right?
It is. The laws surrounding psychedelics are a fascinating mix of restriction and, in some places, growing acceptance. It's a patchwork of regulations that reflects the ongoing debate about the risks and benefits of these substances.
So where do things stand legally?
Well, on the federal level, most psychedelics are still classified as Schedule I drugs. That means they're considered to have a high potential for abuse and no currently accepted medical use.
But I know some states are starting to change their laws, right?
Yes. We're seeing a shift at the state level.
Okay.
Some states and cities have decriminalized certain psychedelics like psilocybin.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that while these substances are still technically illegal, possession of small amounts is no longer a criminal offense. It's a harm reduction approach, acknowledging that criminalizing personal use might do more harm than good.
Right.
And it's paving the way for more research and potential therapeutic applications.
It sounds like things are moving in a positive direction.
I think so.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that we're still in the early stages of understanding these drugs.
Yeah.
There's so much more to learn about their effects, their mechanisms of action, and their long-term consequences.
So research is still crucial.
Absolutely. We need responsible, rigorous, and transparent research. And we need to be mindful of the ethical considerations, ensuring the safety and well-being of participants in clinical trials.
Because ultimately our goal is to harness the potential of these substances while minimizing the risks.
Exactly. It requires a balanced, evidence-based approach that considers both the science and the human experience. Now, let's dive into some of the specific substances that fall under this psychedelic and dissociative umbrella.
Okay.
Each one has its own unique properties and potential applications.
Sounds good. Let's start with the classics, the ones that have been around for centuries, often used in spiritual and ceremonial contexts. Take us on a journey back in time.
Okay, let's travel back to ancient cultures and indigenous traditions. First up, psilocybin.
Okay.
Those magic mushrooms have been used for millennia in religious rituals, especially in Central and South America.
And now they're making a comeback, not just in spiritual circles, but also in scientific labs. I know researchers are really excited about their potential for treating depression, anxiety, and even addiction.
Yes, and the results are very promising. Psilocybin seems to work by temporarily disrupting the default mode network in the brain.
The default mode network. What's that?
Think of it as your brain's autopilot.
Okay.
It's constantly churning, keeping you stuck in those well-worn grooves of thought.
So it's the part of our brain that keeps us ruminating on the past or worrying about the future.
Exactly. And psilocybin comes along and shakes things up.
Yeah.
Kind of like hitting the reset button on your mental autopilot, allowing for new perspectives and a break from negative thought patterns.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about feeling better, it's about actually changing the way our brains work.
Right.
What other psychedelic heavy hitters are there?
Well, there's LSD, or lysergic acid dithylamide.
Okay.
It's a powerful psychedelic that was synthesized in the lab and is known for its intense visual effects and profound psychological experiences. LSD was the subject of much research in the 1950s and 60s, but unfortunately it also became associated with recreational use and some negative publicity.
Right, it got caught up in the counterculture movement and kind of went underground for a while.
Exactly. But now it's being revisited with a more scientific lens, exploring its potential to treat conditions like anxiety, cluster headaches, and even end-of-life distress. And then there's DMT, or dimethyltryptamine.
Okay.
It's a naturally occurring psychedelic found in certain plants and is known for its short but incredibly intense effects. It's often called the spirit molecule because it can induce incredibly vivid and otherworldly experiences.
I've heard people describe DMT trips as feeling like they're traveling to other dimensions or meeting spiritual beings.
Yes, those are common themes in DMT experiences. It's still largely a mystery, but researchers are starting to explore its potential role in treating depression and addiction.
It sounds like there's a lot we still don't know about these powerful substances.
There is.
Yeah.
And then there's mescaline, the psychedelic compound found in peyote cactus.
Right.
It's been used for centuries by indigenous cultures in North America for religious and healing ceremonies.
Mescaline has a long and fascinating history. What are its effects like?
It's known for its visual distortions, introspective effects, and its ability to enhance sensory perception.
Okay.
While research on mescaline is limited compared to other psychedelics, it's gaining interest for its potential to treat addiction and PTSD.
Okay, so we've covered some of the major psychedelics. What about the dissociatives? Where do we start with those?
Let's begin with ketamine, which is actually an anesthetic,
Okay.
but at lower doses, it has powerful dissociative effects.
Interesting.
Ketamine is incredibly intriguing because it works much faster than traditional antidepressants.
Really? So it could be a game changer for people struggling with severe depression.
Potentially. It's already being used in some settings for treatment-resistant depression and even suicidal ideation. And research suggests it can help with PTSD and chronic pain as well.
But we talked about some of the potential risks of ketamine earlier, right?
Yes, as with all of these substances, there are potential downsides.
Right.
Ketamine can have serious side effects, especially with long-term use. So it's absolutely crucial to use it under the supervision of a qualified medical professional.
That makes sense. What other dissociatives should we know about?
There's PCP, or phencyclidine.
Okay.
It's a dissociative with a bit of a notorious reputation. It can cause hallucinations, distorted perceptions, and a sense of detachment from reality.
PCP sounds pretty intense.
It can be. It can also lead to unpredictable and sometimes dangerous behavior. It's a substance with a high potential for abuse and can have serious psychological and physical consequences.
So definitely not something to experiment with.
Right.
What else is out there?
Now, there are a few other substances that blur the lines between psychedelics and dissociatives.
Okay.
One that's been in the news a lot lately is MDMA, or ecstasy.
MDMA is interesting because it seems to have this dual reputation as a party drug and a potential therapy tool.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's known for its ability to induce feelings of euphoria, empathy, and connection. While it's often associated with parties and raves, MDMA is being studied for its potential to treat PTSD and anxiety.
I've heard about that research. How does it work for PTSD?
Early research suggests that MDMA can help people with PTSD process traumatic memories in a safer, more controlled environment. It seems to enhance empathy and reduce fear, allowing for a more therapeutic approach to trauma.
That's pretty incredible. So it's like it helps people revisit those traumatic memories without being completely overwhelmed by fear and anxiety.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that MDMA is still illegal in most places and can have negative side effects, especially if not used responsibly.
Right. It's not a magic bullet.
Right.
There's still a lot of research to be done.
Exactly.
What else is on the horizon?
Another fascinating substance is ibogaine, a naturally occurring psychedelic found in the iboga plant.
Okay.
Ibogaine is fascinating because it's been traditionally used in West Africa for spiritual healing and addiction recovery.
So it has a long history of traditional use.
It does, and
Yeah.
it's known for its intense introspective experiences and its ability to reduce cravings and withdrawal symptoms from opioids.
That sounds promising for people struggling with opioid addiction.
It does, but it's important to note that ibogaine is also controversial due to its potential for serious side effects, including heart problems, so it's definitely not something to be taken lightly.
Right. Safety first. What else is on our list?
And finally, we have salvia, or Salvia divinorum.
Okay.
It's a plant native to Mexico that has been used for centuries in shamanic practices. Salvia is unique because it produces short but intense dissociative effects, often characterized by strange and sometimes unsettling visions.
I've heard salvia trips described as being very disorienting and even frightening.
Yes, its effects are unlike other psychedelics, and it's not typically associated with euphoria or mystical experiences.
Right.
Salvia is still legal in some places, but it's important to use it with extreme caution, as it can cause disorientation, confusion, and even loss of coordination.
So it's definitely not a drug to be taken lightly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And with that, we've explored some of the key substances in this fascinating and complex realm of psychedelic and dissociative drugs. It's been quite a journey, wouldn't you say?
It really has. We've traveled from ancient rituals to modern therapy, from the depths of the brain to the heights of spiritual experience. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm left wondering, where do we go from here? What does the future hold for these mind-altering substances?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive, into this fascinating world of psychedelics and dissociatives.
We've journeyed through the science and the potential benefits, the risks, the cultural impact, and even the spiritual debates surrounding these mind-altering substances.
Right.
But now I think it's time to look ahead.
That's right. We've explored the past and the present, but the future of psychedelics is where things get really interesting. It's a future brimming with possibilities unfolding right before our eyes.
It feels like we're on the verge of a major shift, in how we understand the brain consciousness and even the nature of reality itself.
Absolutely. And the engine driving this transformation is research.
Right.
Scientists are delving deeper than ever before, using cutting-edge technology to unravel the mysteries of how these substances work.
I've read about some fascinating studies using brain imaging techniques to actually see what's happening in the brain when someone takes a psychedelic. It's like watching the mind light up.
Exactly. They're mapping the neural pathways, identifying the receptors, and deciphering the complex interplay of neurochemicals. And with each new discovery, we're gaining a clearer picture of how psychedelics can be harnessed for therapeutic purposes.
Good.
We're moving beyond anecdotal evidence and into the realm of rigorous scientific inquiry.
So we're building a solid foundation of knowledge that can lead to safer and more effective treatments.
Precisely. And this is paving the way for new treatments,
Yeah.
new approaches to mental health care that could potentially revolutionize the field.
One of the most exciting areas I've been reading about is the development of personalized psychedelic therapy. It's like tailoring the experience to each individual's unique needs.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Imagine a world where psychedelic therapy is as personalized as a DNA test. We're talking about taking into account the individual's brain chemistry, their psychological profile, their personal history, and even their spiritual beliefs.
Right.
This is the future we're moving towards, a future where treatment is precise, effective, and truly tailored to the individual.
That's an incredible vision. It's
Yeah.
like moving away from the one-size-fits-all model of mental health care and embracing the complexity of the human experience.
I couldn't agree more. And as we continue to unlock the secrets of the brain, we're also expanding our understanding of consciousness itself.
That's what I find so fascinating about this whole field.
Yeah.
Psychedelics seem to offer a window into the workings of the mind,
Right.
a glimpse into the nature of perception, thought, and even self-awareness.
Think of them as tools for exploring the inner landscape, for mapping the uncharted territories of consciousness. And this is leading to some truly fascinating insights into the nature of creativity, spirituality, and the interconnectedness of all things.
It's almost like psychedelics are helping us to rewrite the textbooks on the human mind, expanding the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
That's a great way to put it. And the implications extend far beyond mental health care. We're talking about potential applications in fields like education, art, technology, and even conflict resolution.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. It's like a ripple effect, expanding outward and influencing so many aspects of our lives.
Imagine harnessing the power of psychedelics to enhance learning, to unlock creative potential, to foster empathy and connection between people from different cultures, or even to help us develop more sustainable ways of living. The possibilities are truly mind-boggling.
It's an exciting and inspiring vision of the future.
It is. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility. It's crucial that we proceed with caution, wisdom, and a deep respect for the profound nature of these substances.
I think that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah.
We need to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past when psychedelics were demonized and driven underground. We need to approach this new era with a balanced perspective, integrating the best of science and spirituality.
I completely agree. We need to be mindful of the risks, to prioritize harm reduction, and to ensure that access to these therapies is equitable and just.
Right.
The future of psychedelics is not just about scientific breakthroughs. It's about creating a world where these substances are used ethically, responsibly, and for the benefit of all.
Beautifully said. It's about harnessing their power to heal, to inspire, and to expand our understanding of what it means to be human.
And that's a future worth striving for. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we invite you to reflect on what you've learned, to stay curious, and to engage in this important conversation.
The future of psychedelics is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in ensuring that it unfolds in a way that benefits humanity and the planet as a whole.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep